There were three great trails in the Trans-Missourian West. The Oregon and Mormon trails were routes of human migration. Men, women, and children traveled to Oregon, California, or Utah in search of homes and a new start. The other trail was a trail of commerce and was used for 59 years. The Santa Fe Trail was much like a modern highway. Wagons loaded with freight left Missouri for the 900-mile journey to Santa Fe.
We are at a place called Ralph's Ruts. This is an old family homestead. We have 40 acres that has never been plowed. There are Santa Fe Trail ruts through here, more or less running pretty much westerly. Since this was never plowed or cultivated, the ruts are still there. Had it been plowed, the ruts would be gone.
This is a lost day to us. It is impossible to cross the creek. I took a ride on horseback this morning, and I intend to ride every day, as our horse is easy and gentle. The adjutant sent me half a loaf of bread today, and it was quite a treat. The woman who cooks for him came over with her yeast and made me up a loaf for tomorrow. She says I look so much better than when we left Leavenworth that I ought to stay on the prairie all the time. The woman came from Santa Fe with Mrs. Henry and understands camp life. A soldier, Private Fisher, was drowned this afternoon. Anna Maria Morris, 1850.
This is in the general area of the Walnut Crossing on the Santa Fe Trail, which was quite a famous place. Everyone knew it, sometimes by different names. It was either Allison's Fort, or Allison's Ranch, or Allison Booth Ranch, or the Peacock Trading Post, or the Raft Trading Post, or Fort Zara.
A more permanent post was established in June of 1864 and named Fort Zara.
They come up here and built a 90-foot by 60-foot fort with towers at opposite corners. It was located right in here. Part of it was in this borrow ditch along the new highway here, and part of it extended out here in this field. It had a ditch, or rather it had a cellar at each end of the building about 15 feet wide. In one of the cellars there was a water well so that they wouldn't have to come out for water. The time that this fort sat here, it was used primarily for escorts on the mail and the wagon trains.
The years 1862 to 1869 were traumatic years with an increase in Indian conflicts. Ray Schultz describes an incident known as the Walnut Creek Massacre. Photographs provided by Bob Button verify the historical accounts.
In 1864, there was a wagon train massacre that occurred here, and 10 people were killed, 10 teamsters, and 8 of them were scalped. Their graves were discovered in April of 1972, and they were right over here on the creek bank. High water in the creek had washed out some of the bones, and they were discovered that way.
Popular literature dramatized Indian attacks. However, travelers were more likely to die of disease and accidents. In the summer of 1872, this stretch of the Santa Fe Trail became obsolete with the construction of the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad. However, the old freight trail was not forgotten. Today, travelers can follow the route by the DAR markers placed in 1911. In 1987, the Santa Fe Trail was designated a National Historic Trail. Today, freight still travels the same route as the long caravans once did, passing historic markers and landmarks. Dr. Raymond Powers.
It's very important that we preserve trail ruts, that we preserve these various sites along the trail, and that we provide interpretive centers where we tell the story of the trail. For a couple of reasons. One is certainly just to be able to continually tell of the human drama that is part of the past. Tell of those heroic stories and those not so heroic stories at times. But the other aspect of it is simply to have these pieces of the trail preserved as part of the landscape of our mind, so that the past isn't just a kind of memory from book, memory from manuscript, but it is in fact tangible to us in some way. And that's really why we need to keep tangible parts of our past there, because they reinforce the idea that we are a people of memory, that it is our memory and our sense of the past that makes us what we are as human beings. And I feel that it is extraordinarily important that not only that we keep that memory through the documentation, the books and the stories and all of that, but we also have to keep tangible reminders of that story. And that's why we also need to keep places like Fort Larned, Ruts on the Trail, because they are what we have left, tangible reflections of that memory.
It has been 50 years since the beginning of World War II, and like many turning points in human history, the events between 1941 and 1945 have gradually become no more than words printed on a page, old black and white images and artifacts found in museums. But to the nations and the individuals who experienced the realities of war, it is much, much more.
At Barton County Community College, there's an ongoing and unique endeavor being undertaken by the history instructor Linda McCaffrey. For 5 years, she's been interviewing Kansas veterans of World War II and preserving these personal insights on videotape. Copies of these special historical records are sent to the college's library, the Eisenhower and Truman Library Archives, and the National Archives Central Plains Branch in Kansas City, Missouri. These invaluable sources of historical information are important in that they offer insights into the personal accounts of World War II beyond what is written in the textbooks. This oral history library can provide opportunities to learn more about the people directly involved with the historical events of World War II.
I think one of the values of the oral history libraries as a historian and a history teacher is that it's made me more sensitive and more empathetic to the trials and tribulations of the people that actually were involved in the events, World War II, the events at home. And I think that's given me a better perspective in my teaching. And I believe it's also helped other people. One of the nursing instructors uses one of the tapes of a World War II nurse in our history of nursing class. Also, one of our sociology teachers has used them to demonstrate some of the impact of society of a traumatic event like World War II.
Veterans like Al Croker of Great Bend offer unique accounts of the events and leaders most people only read about. When Mr. Croker was in Europe with the 1st Armored Division, directing the movement of tanks heading for the front lines, he stopped a car that was approaching, motioning it to wait. At first, he did not realize that the car was carrying General Eisenhower himself.
When I happened to turn around and I saw all those stars on that front bumper, and I thought, my gosh, I've stopped the commander-in-chief. And he was getting out of the car, and I thought, oh, boy, I'm going to catch it now. And he indicated that just to do my job, and he asked me after the next set of tanks went around, why he asked me where I was from, and I told him Kansas, and he said, I'm from Abilene, and shook my hand. And then he got in his car and drove off. But that was quite a thrill.
Insights like these are not only for research and education, but for preserving the personal stories of veterans for generations to come.
One of the main things I wanted for is because those in the family who follow and might be interested in knowing what did I do, what I was involved in 50 to 100 years ago. And I regret not talking to my grandfather when he was alive, and also my father. And I really doing it for my grandkids.
Minneapolis. The New Orleans received an enemy torpedo, hit forward and blew off the entire bow, and turret one. Turret one just went right down. We're going 29. The bow went down, went under us, and our forward momentum took us over the bow, and she bumped 2 holes in the stern, and tore off one of our 4 screws. So we really were in bad shape. From that, we made, believe it or not, by Ripley. It was the only ship in the Navy to ram itself.
And I remember we were still about 20 minutes, probably, or 30 minutes away from the target. And we could feel them. I watched them out through the nose because I was down below the navigator and below the nose gunner, and I could see them coming high from above and coming through us and then circling down below and coming back around. And I knew we were being hit. And it was interesting because there was no, outside of my own voice, there was no one on the intercom, you know, saying, "Here they come," or anything. I remember making some statement about, "Give them hell, boys," or something like that, but it was real quiet. The fire, the hydraulic fire underneath the flight deck it burned. I had a burr haircut, but it burned the rest of that off and you know, burned me slightly in the face and stuff. Just got it on. The chest chute buckled and the plane blew.
So do you know how you got out? Do you think it threw you out?
I think the plane left me.
I think it just threw you out.
I can remember these first Germans I noticed, dead Germans. I noticed their belt buckles. And it had said, "Gott mit uns," which means God be with us. And I absolutely couldn't figure out why two opposing armies should be so deathly mad at each other with believing that they were on God's side, and why God would allow this thing. Well, from that moment until probably on the beachhead, before I came to my senses and decided, well, I've got to do what I've got to do, and that's the way it is, and that's probably the way they feel too. So I let it go at that, and then I forgot about it until maybe 40 years later.
We started our company reunions in '86 in St. Petersburg, Florida, after we'd met in Washington, D.C. in '85, the 7 of us. And we've found 68 that we know that were wounded or never got wounded in our group. And we've met every year. 2 years the first go around, and ever since we've been meeting every year. And we became closer together, and we'd call each other. If somebody passes away, we have a network that we call each other and notify everybody of the passing or surgery, anything like that. And so we haven't really drifted apart. The whole company stayed pretty tight.
In 1988, Barton County Community College made a commitment to an oral history library project to preserve the memories of the men and women who experienced World War II.
And of course, there is something to say for the choice of building material. Here, good old Kansas limestone has survived the storm while wood frame buildings are blown away. Best of luck recovering, everybody.
And because, look at that airplane did an awful lot. You see, without that airplane, there's no way that we could have devastated Japan like we did.
Now, it might be a little hard to see, but if you pick up a student newspaper, current issue, you will see a cartoon that Chris drew. You'll see an editorial that was written by Jennifer. In the cartoon, you see Mr. Kilby trying to pull a door open, and below it, Chris wrote, "In an ironic twist of fate, Jack Kilby, inventor of the integrated circuit, becomes the inventor of his own peril when he encounters an electronically locked door." These are, if you wonder about the color and you haven't seen something like this before, these are the plates off of which that particular issue was printed. They've been matted and framed, and if you two would please present this to Mr. Kilby.
Today we'd like to welcome Jack Kilby, the man who invented the microchip, to do an oral history. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you.
Is winning the Nobel Prize some 42 years after your IC invention somewhat redeeming?
Oh, I'm not aware that I ever thought I needed to be redeemed, but it's certainly a wonderful thing to have.
This weekend, the community has put together a gala occasion, all because of your return to the area. Granted, this isn't the Nobel Prize, but how does this rate with the recognition that you've received?
Well, this is a beautiful kind of recognition, and I'm very much appreciative of the work that all the people have done here to make it possible.
You write in the book that both Jack Kilby and Robert Noyce didn't get the recognition they deserve for the magnitude of their inventions. You know, people know who Alexander Graham Bell is without you explaining who they are. They know who Thomas Edison is without explaining who he is. Do you believe that Jack, at least, is getting some of that recognition nowadays?
Well, you're doing a TV show about him. That has to help. Yeah, it's starting. He's starting to get it. Not enough. I just gave a speech at a high school, and I said, can anybody here name Courtney Love's former husband? You know, yeah, of course they all knew that, you know. Can you name Madonna's new husband? Oh, yeah, we all know that. Can you name the guy who invented the microchip and changed the daily life of the world? Complete blank. So I feel Americans should know this. I think Americans should know that a guy who got a good education, who applied himself, who worked hard and got a good idea, improved life for everybody. I think it's an inspiring story. And no, I don't think Americans know this yet. We haven't focused on the right heroes, and that's what my book is trying to do.
Is this what you thought the weekend would be, and is this worth the trip from London?
Yeah, it's definitely worth the trip from London. You know, I've never met anybody from Kansas I didn't like. I just like being in Kansas. It's a great place, and Jack is a classic Canton. You know, he's understated, he's quiet, he's the nicest guy in the world. And yeah, I think I think he's quite touched, even though Jack does not like people making a fuss about him. I think he's quite moved that Great Bend remembers him and remember that he's the local boy.
Jack has a word that I think he invented. I never heard anybody use it before. I think it may be his favorite word. He often uses this word, and the word is non-obvious. If you have a big problem, it doesn't matter whether it's an engineering problem, an economic problem, a marital problem, it doesn't matter. The best way to solve it is to find the non-obvious solution. You need a non-obvious solution. He's always told me this, because if the answer is obvious, somebody's already tried it. All the obvious answers have been tried already, and they probably didn't work, or you would know about them. He always told me. So you needed a non-obvious solution, and so Jack is working at Texas Instruments, and he told me, I asked him once, how did this happen? How did you get this idea? You were the youngest guy there. And Jack said, yeah, you know, that was really the reason. He said, I was the dumb freshman. I was too stupid to know what wouldn't work. And this is really true, don't you think? I think in all of life, the seniors know everything, and they don't ask the stupid questions, and the freshman asks the dumb question and probably comes up with the good answer because he doesn't know the way they've always done it. Jack was brand new, and he asked a really rather interesting question. People were saying, God, you know, we could build this great computer, but it would take millions of transistors, and we'd have to wire them all together, and it's just so expensive to wire them, and you have miles and miles and miles of wire in this computer, and you just couldn't, it's just impossible. And Jack essentially asked this question, so why do you need the wires? What do you mean, why do you need the wires? An electric circuit, it's got wires, you know. You wire a capacitor to a resistor to a diode to a this, to a transistor, that's how they work. And Jack said, no, you know, I think if I took this little piece of silicon and I carved out one part here and I carved out another part there, I could make all the parts of the circuit, all the essential parts of a computer I could make on one little piece of silicon. And then he thought, you know, if I did make them all on one piece of silicon, I wouldn't need any wires. They'd all be in there together. I could just connect them right on the same block, the same chip. That's the idea. It was crucially important for the United States that it was an American engineer who got this idea. And that is the reason why today we lead the world in this field of microelectronics, because he got this idea.
Thank you all very much. And It's been an exciting 2 days, and I'm really almost overwhelmed by the emotions that have been expressed. But it's great to be in Great Bend. I will always think of it as my hometown. And it's very good to see all of you again. Thank you.